So, Brian, it's great to have you with us tonight. Welcome to Washington. Welcome to CEPA. It's such an interesting moment to have a conversation with someone like you who heads one of the biggest global financial institutions. A lot we could talk about, and we'll get there. We're going to pan out a little bit, but I wanted to start with a little about your life. So I was doing my, intel gathering on you, and I just wanted to go back to the beginning because I learned that you were from the great state of Ohio, but from a pretty small town in Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it struck me that you had an interesting and maybe somewhat unusual career for someone who's now the CEO of a major global financial institution. I learned you were a history major back in Brown. And then you went to law school before you began practicing at a bank, and I think the rest was history. But I just wanted to get you to talk a little bit about, how you thought about your career, and particularly your time in the last 15 years at Bank of America, because we'll get into this a little bit later in the conversation, but there have been some turbulent times that you've seen this institution through. So how does the place you come from, I guess what I'm trying to ask, inform your decision-making today?
Well, first, thank you for having me. Thank you on behalf of my 200,000 plus teammates. It's an honor to be honored for this. It's going to be hard to follow the stories from Howard's great work in Ukraine to the two journalists and Boris Johnson being Boris Johnson and describing it. And I've had to follow him before. And so those stories are compelling. In the end of the day, I had a great family growing up. I was one of 8 kids, so you learned a lot about life then, how to eat fast, how not to speak too loudly when you said something critically. But I think as we think about how we run our company, what's informed me is you really want to make sure you do a great job for the shareholders, you do a great job for the customers, you do a great job for the teammates, but also do a great job for your communities. And banks are unique that way, that we are a product of the economy, and we have to then make sure the economy is taken care of. And that's not only in Charlotte, North Carolina, we're headquartered, it's also around the world. And so, we believe that, we drive it. It's not any one of those, it's all those. And I think that comes from sort of thinking through, the idea that we have to basically behave and handle our business affairs in a way that we can stand up, in a way that will feel good, in a way we'd like to be handled, frankly. So it's as much the golden rule as anything else. Yeah.
So just to connect our conversation to the first half of this evening that's focused so much on Ukraine, the resilience of Ukraine, as our Vice Chair George mentioned in his introduction, the bank really stepped in a crisis response kind of mode after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, certainly even before that. But I wanted to ask you about crises in general. I said that you've seen your fair share of them, and I was just making a short list of all the crises you've had to deal with since you've been in Bank of America. The financial crisis, obviously, COVID, and now, of course, the 2014 invasion, the 22 invasion, and the list can go on, right? And so your team, as you mentioned, 200,000 people strong. It's a big organization. How do you think about moments when you have to pivot and adapt quickly, and you have to turn and steer this pretty large ship? How do you think about crisis response?
So our crisis response has been honed from a lot of years' experience in over the course of the oldest part of the companies from 1784. So they went through a lot of crisis over time, and you think about that. But I think about 4 dimensions. First, you have to take care of the teammates. So whether it's the storm in Western North Carolina, we had to take care of the teammates. Whether it was when Russia invaded Ukraine, we had teammates that worked in Moscow, because at that time, everybody was doing business in Moscow. We had to figure out what was going to happen to them. We had teammates had family members in Ukraine. Immediately, that was the issue. And so it's always about, first, where are the teammates? Let's find them. Let's make sure they're safe. Let's then figure out what they need, and let's go after helping them. And we have a very strong group that does that all the time. And tomorrow there'll be a storm someplace, or an event, or earthquake, and unfortunately sometimes a shooting, and the things that we have to respond to. So first, teammates. Then how do you handle customers? And how you help, and then how you help the community. In the case of Ukraine and the invasion, Russia invasion 3 years ago plus, instantaneously, it's how do you provide broad relief? And so typically the first response is broad relief. And so we actually worked with World Kitchens and Red Crescent, Red Cross, and provide just humanitarian relief, just money. There's not much we can do. We didn't have a big operation. In different places it's different, but you do that. And so it's team, family, because that team has to operate the next day no matter what went on. Then it's making sure the customers are treated fairly, so if there have to be waivers or all those types of things. And then you think about the communities and the basic help. And then you got to think about where you really add value. And what was unique about Ukraine is we came to the conclusion that the best value we could have was our brains, and not my brains, but the brains of people who could help them think through the issues were coming. And that was unique. And Aksa Jakurti, who it's her birthday today, so she's not here, but she's been, for the last 2.5 years, she's worked full time for the Ukrainian government trying to solve their financing needs for them, not for us. We put her in there, we pay her salary, and she does it, but it's how do we give them our advice, and our unvarnished advice, and that's been kind of interesting.
So just panning out a little bit to just the broader topic of geopolitical uncertainty, I think it's become almost trite, if you will, to say that geopolitics are now back in the boardroom. I think every single financial sector institution is thinking about that, whether they're starting their own geopolitical strategic advisory groups inside or looking for that kind of advice elsewhere. Maybe you could put your history hat back on for us from your undergrad years back in Brown. But how do you think about this current geopolitical moment more broadly, and the uncertainty that many around the world feel about the future of the international order?
Well, in the end of the day, the geopolitical, the change of the world order, we just had our Global Advisor Council, listen to people from all around the world in the last 24 hours, listen to them. It's always going to be, how do you sort that all out? And how do you add value when people need it? How do you don't get involved in politics, which you can't really shape, but how do you handle it? But it's there. And the way it's going to affect us is more how it affects economies, and how it affects people, and how it affects their ability to earn money, employment levels. We've had occasions where a building got destroyed or something like that, but that's going to be rare. But the geopolitics is going to be about how it affects the economy. And so then you think about, what do you need to do? So one of the things we all do at my senior team, and everybody's gather information and try to learn from it, and then try to work with our board of directors to understand the ramifications of policy, the ramifications of geopolitical conflict, the ramifications of trade wars, the ramification of tariffs. And then on the different side, we try to provide advice to the governments about what they should do and how they should approach it, not because we're them, but because we know what the receiver that's going to get. So in this situation, from the very beginning, when I heard the representatives of Ukraine come in May of 22 to Davos in a room like this and stand up and said, we will fight to the death. All we want is support. And listening to the intensity in that dialogue with those representatives, I was able, at other places in the world, because you're in situations, to be able to talk to people, not that I was going to affect the outcome, but that I could represent that this is how the people really felt, because they told it to us in a room like this, and they told us in a small room, and they did, and they came 12 hours or whatever it was down there to just tell us that. And so while geopolitics affects us, we all worry about it, we all think about it, it's going to affect our company because we're a bank, we're a little unique, because it's going to be around the economy. But we have a duty to use the best brains we have in our company to try to help people tell their story in a way that we think helps the resolution. And in this case, over the last 3 years, we've had the honor of hosting President Zelensky in our building to talk to other business people. My head of international went in Ukraine 2.5, 3 years ago with a group to help expose the business community what they needed. It's so the geopolitics is in the boardroom. It's not a big exposure risk for us. That was minor. It's not a big personal risk because we didn't have a lot of employees there. It's a teammates, family risk. But it's really a risk of economic distress due to the activities of governments and the ramifications. And our job is to, in a bit, educate them about the ramifications of that.
So you and I were chatting earlier, and I've heard you talk about this topic before. And as you've probably heard, I hope you heard by now, CEPA does a lot of work thinking about the implications and opportunities of technology for all kinds of different sectors, for the international order more broadly. And in many ways, I think finance is the future of tech.
Yeah.
I've heard some colleagues from the tech sector even tell me that. And of course, now when we talk about tech, everyone talks about AI.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how you think about this new technology and its integration, adaptation in the broader financial sector, of Bank of America in particular. Where do you see the opportunities there? Where do you see the challenges going forward? Not just for Bank of America, but I think for the entire financial sector.
Well, I think, so in the 24-hour period, we have 7 million customer interactions with AI a day. So think about this. This is not a theoretical thing. It's going on every day.
This is just Bank of America.
Just Bank of America.
Okay.
And so that's just the interaction between a customer with Erica, that hopefully you're all clients. If you aren't, you can be. Erica is what you call a genic bot today, but when we built it 7 years ago, nobody knew those words. And it happens 7 million times today. So it's not a theory, it's happening. And so I think as you think about, technology has always had an impact on our activities. We are people who are human beings. The computers that they use to get data and manipulate them, and the buildings to keep them dry, that's our company. And so therefore, technology is core to everything we do. And the customer's change is also driving all this. So, so the customer behavior change. So if you think about it going forward, the implications are far-reaching because generally technologies of the past affected processing jobs or the numbers of branches we had, how you behaved with your account affected how many branches we have. This one affects everybody. And so the computer coders, we've basically saved 1,800 computer coder full-time equivalents, people that we've reinvested to do more computer coding by just applying the technology so far. It's only been 6 months in operation. So out of 18,000, we saved 10% of the FTE equivalents on a go-forward basis, and we reinvest that in developing more technology. That's pretty remarkable. And so it's just going to affect jobs that would never affected. It's going to affect ways we never thought of. But it has to be controlled, because none of you are going to be happy when I said, oh, you didn't get your mortgage loan. The machine made me do it. None of you are going to be happy when we make a mistake, because you're going to say, hey, you're the people, not this machine. So it's got to be controlled. The data has to be arrayed. It has to have the controls around it, but it will touch everything we do. And the combination of the machine learning and artificial intelligence, the technology systems distributed, which people forget about, that's the power, and the data centers you hear everything about today. And then, frankly, robotics. And the dexterity and the capabilities of robotics. And we hear a lot about drone warfare and the capabilities the Ukraine developed, which were not known in the world until they utilized them, and how fast they built them and how inexpensive they were able to build them. That is a robot. I mean, so it's pretty amazing. That's going to change, so I think whatever we think today, it'll be different in the future. It'll change work definitely, but 50 years ago, we had half as many people working in the United States as we do today. So don't be pessimistic about this. Somehow I think it'll work through. We went from 80 million people working to 160 million people over the course of 50 years. Technology harnessed by, this is a very American comment, technology harnessed by the American capitalistic system has done a lot of good stuff, and we got to let it run, but we also have to be ready for the fallout from it. And how do we handle the human being dislocations, and how to redeploy people, and how do we retrain people? Those are all things that managers like me and other management companies have to think about hard, but it's going to be a wonderful thing.
So you think on the balance, because there's a big debate happening, certainly in Europe and here in the United States, is AI and all the technology that is being developed as we speak, robotics, quantum, all of that, is the balance more on the side of opportunity or on the side of risk?
Well, the intelligence manages risk, so you could look at it a lot of different ways. But I think it's an opportunity. I think that the productivity to be invested, if this works 20% of what they think, 30% of what they think, the productivity we can invest to do better services and better capabilities. In the end of the day, these markets are massively competitive, and ultimately, the earnings you get from this get competed away by industries. Now, some industries may not be in that condition. So if you look at long term, all the technologies come into financial services. The return on assets in the industry has been on a steady decline for the last 25 years. And all that really has been given back to the customer in benefits, 24-hour access, this, that. Yeah. And so there's nothing wrong with it. We make a good return and we do it. But ultimately, if it works, it ought to go for the benefits of society. And then think about medicine and think about in areas that are just amazingly capable of distributing, Albert Einstein's brain to everybody instantaneously is a pretty fantastic thing. So the ability even into developing countries and other places to distribute medical technology and capabilities is really pretty fantastic. So I think I think it's opportunity. I think we just have to make sure people see it that way and harness it.
Just as a final note, I heard a really interesting term the other day that was apparently used by a colleague's, 19, 20-year-old student. And apparently it's quite common for that generation. I think it's the alpha generation, if I'm not mistaken. AI vegans. I had never heard that before, but apparently this is a very well-known term among people who are, just entering college now, and then they're very skeptical of AI, at least in this country, And I just thought I would share that with you because I found it pretty fascinating.
I will tell you that the kids, we hired 2,000 plus kids from schools that start with 100,000 people. We hired 2,000 of them. There are almost 200,000 applications. So think how bright and talented these kids are. And yet, if you ask them, are you worried about the impact of this on you personally? They all say. So we got to get them to think about it the other way around, which is how do they harness it for capabilities. But I bet you if we were sitting here in the late 60s and the computer was just coming into masters, the ability to get it in companies for the IBM 360s and things like that in the distribution, I bet you we felt the same way. And so the question is, how do we harness it, and how do those young kids harness it and understand it and drive it? And they'll be much better at it than we are. But I will tell you that the danger zone is for people of my generation to just tell them it's going to be. We have to help them make it okay, and that's the key. And so I think we have a responsibility as leaders of companies to how to manage that impact and work the benefit. And we'll see. It's going to be fun.
Yes. That's a really good note to end on, the fun that AI has for all of us. So please join me in thanking Brian Moynihan.